The day before the SATs, I cast the coins for myself. The reading was simple. Go with the flow. So I did. My final score came back 20 points higher than my best practice test. I'd gotten into the same university as my girlfriend, but she didn't seem happy. She said she needed to get away, to clear her head. I cast the coins for her, and the reading was a disaster. I tried to talk her out of it for hours. The art of divination was a family inheritance, passed down from my grandfather, and she'd always been a little wary of it. In the end, she didn't go. I never imagined she'd hold it against me. Looking at the coins now, how could I have just let things be? The ending was already written in the pattern. 4 years of college flew by. We were about to be engaged, to spend the rest of our lives together. The night before the engagement party, a knot of anxiety tightened in my gut. I stared at the empty half of the king-sized bed, my eyelid twitching violently. Uneasy, I cast the coins for myself one more time. The reading, a fateful connection, shadowed by a dark eclipse. My heart seized. It was an omen of joy laced with disaster. But the party was tomorrow. The invitations were sent, the caterers booked. I tried to force the anxiety down, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. I took a deep breath, my trembling fingers tossing the 3 old copper coins again. The moment they settled, a cold sweat drenched my back. The reading was unmistakable. A vision of violence, a life on the line. The next day, at the engagement party, I put on a calm face and went through the motions. After the last guest had left, I quietly tucked a fruit knife under my pillow and hung the old silver dagger my grandfather had left me on the back of the bedroom door. Late that night, I feigned sleep, just as I'd expected. I heard my fiancée slip out of bed, her footsteps impossibly light. I heard the soft click of the deadbolt she'd just unlocked. A mess of shuffling footsteps echoed from the hallway, and I squinted to see a dozen dark figures flooding into our bedroom. Quick, while he's asleep. His fiancée's voice, cold as ice, cut through the darkness. I threw myself from the bed, rolling to the floor as the dream shattered and I woke up, heart hammering against my ribs. A dream is just a dream, but the readings don't lie. First thing in the morning, I had someone look into it. Chloe had spent the entire night at the hospital. Her friend, Dylan Ryder, had attempted suicide and was in recovery. After a little digging, I finally understood. Chloe's heart had always belonged to Dylan. He was a charity case. A kid the Vance family had sponsored, plucked from the mountains of Appalachia and dropped into our elite private high school for 3 years. The summer after graduation, 4 years ago, Dylan had used his savings to book a trip for himself and Chloe to Thailand. Because of my reading, a dire warning, Chloe had canceled at the last minute. Dylan went alone. He was supposedly kidnapped and held in some godforsaken scam compound. After 2 weeks of what he called torture, the Vances paid a ransom and brought him back. From that day on, Dylan was diagnosed with severe depression, and Chloe blamed me. If I hadn't interfered, she would have been with him, and maybe, just maybe, things would have turned out differently. If her heart belonged to someone else, then this engagement was a sham. I texted her to meet at the Daily Grind, a coffee shop near the hospital. When she arrived, she looked exhausted. The look she gave me was laced with a new, venomous resentment. I didn't waste any time. Chloe, are you in love with Dylan? A flicker of panic in her eyes confirmed my suspicion. Calmly, I took out the 3 old coins and tossed them onto the table. They spun with a soft, metallic chime. A sign of water of being pulled under, I said softly, studying the pattern, followed by a warning of being trapped. A choice with no good outcome. The color drained from Chloe's face. She knew what a reading like that meant. Indecision, being caught between 2 impossible paths. Her lips began to tremble. If it weren't for you, Dylan would never have ended up like this. She looked up, her eyes welling with tears. Do you have any idea what he went through in that compound? They used cattle prods. This is all your fault. Her voice cracked with emotion. I know. I interrupted her. But the readings don't lie. If you had gone with him, it would have been 2 of you in trouble, not 1. I knew what she was struggling with. The Whites and the Vances were old-money Newport families. Our alliance a merger of dynasties. It was the future both our families had banked on. The Vances would never allow their daughter to marry the charity case they'd sponsored, especially not some poor kid from the mountains. The engagement is off, I said with a sigh, standing up to leave. It was getting dark when I walked out of the coffee shop. I stood on the street corner and, on a whim, I cast the coins one last time. A sign of light being buried, of brilliance being extinguished. It was a terrible omen. a sign of an even greater disaster to come. I called my father immediately and explained the situation. The line was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. "Come home. We'll talk." The engagement was off. Within a day, the news had ripped through Newport's elite circles. The talk of the town was that Leo White, the heir to the White fortune, had fled the country overnight. After a long discussion that night, my father calmly suggested I go abroad. To Italy. A few years away would do me good. A chance to get some international experience under my belt. For 3 years, I deliberately cut myself off from most of my contacts back home. I barely even spoke to my father. I knew that only by disappearing completely would I allow certain people to lower their guard. It might even transform me into a romantic, what if, memory in someone's mind. Besides, less contact didn't mean I was uninformed. As the plane touched down at T.F. Green Airport, I took a deep breath of the air. The city felt both familiar and alien. My phone was already blowing up with unread messages, mostly welcome backs from old friends. "Leo, over here." I'd barely cleared the arrival's gate when I heard Alex's booming voice. A few of our best friends from school stood behind him, all dressed in tailored suits but with the same troublemaking grins they'd had as kids. "You son of a gun, you're finally back." Alex threw an arm around my shoulder. "Tonight, we're not going home sober." I laughed and nodded, but my eyes scanned the crowd involuntarily. She wasn't there. In the private room of an upscale restaurant, I held a glass of champagne, listening to my friends recount the last 3 years of gossip, chiming in here and there. Suddenly, the door to the room swung open. Everyone's gaze snapped to the entrance. The laughter died, and the atmosphere instantly turned to ice. Standing in the doorway were Chloe and her new fiancé. My eyes met hers, and for a second, I saw an emotion I couldn't quite read. Dylan, her companion, deliberately tightened his arm around hers, a smug, possessive look on his face. My friends exchanged glances, their eyes darting to me to gauge my reaction. I was the first to stand, a polite smile fixed on my face. "Long time no see. Come, join us." I acted as if nothing had ever happened between us. Chloe hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Dylan, trying to project an air of confidence, puffed out his chest and sat down beside her. But everyone ignored him, leaving him in a painfully awkward silence. Dylan's reputation over the past few years wasn't exactly stellar. He'd leveraged Chloe's trust to make a fool of himself more than once. Back in high school, when Chloe and I were dating, he was always there, conveniently popping up wherever she was, showering her with just enough attention. At the time, I thought it was simple gratitude. I never suspected it was a calculated scheme. With his mind entirely focused on Chloe, his grades plummeted, much to the disappointment of the Fiancées, who were footing his tuition. In the end, he barely scraped by into a state college. You can't polish a turd, as they say. After the Fiancées rescued him from Thailand, he used the incident as a perpetual excuse to stay close to Chloe. It was the kind of manipulative act you'd see in a soap opera. While I was abroad, I had him thoroughly investigated. His so-called medical records were all faked. There was no clinical depression. Everything he did was for Chloe. And in the end, she fell for him. When my friends found out, they were ready to go to war for me. This was, in their eyes, the ultimate betrayal, a stolen fiancé. I told them to stand down. If Chloe hadn't given him the opening, he never would have succeeded. After a few rounds of drinks, the mood in the room started to warm up again. Dylan, however, was left out in the cold, his expression growing darker by the minute. Everyone was speaking in a shorthand of shared memories and inside jokes, a language he couldn't understand. He tried to interject a few times, but someone always managed to talk over him. Dylan sat there, back ramrod straight, occasionally leaning in to whisper in Chloe's ear, but her gaze kept drifting, unintentionally, to me. I pretended not to notice and kept laughing with my friends. Then Alex stood up, raising his glass toward Dylan. I knew what he was doing, and I didn't stop him. After all, this was my welcome home party. They deserved to have a little fun at his expense. "Dylan," Alex said, swirling his drink, a predatory glint in his smile. "We've all known each other a while, but we've never really had a drink together." I narrowed my eyes slightly, watching the panic flash across Dylan's face. He instinctively leaned closer to Chloe, his fingers twisting together. I don't really drink," Dylan stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "No way." Alex's eyes widened theatrically. "Dude, last week you were bragging about how you sealed that big deal for Vance Industries over a round of shots." "Chloe, You're not gonna let your man disrespect us like this, are you? Dude, not cool. Dylan's face was a rigid mask of discomfort. Seeing his distress, Chloe picked up her glass, a pained, apologetic look on her face. I'll drink this one for him. A moment later, someone else raised their glass to toast Dylan. Just as Chloe tilted her head back to down the second drink, I reached out and put my hand over her wrist. I glanced at the spineless man beside her and said with a casual smile, "Come on, guys. Leave them alone." I gently took the glass from her hand. My fingertips brushed against her wrist, and I felt her flinch. The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. I swirled the glass, the amber liquid glowing in the low light. "This one," I said, looking around the table. "I'll take for Chloe." I downed it in one go. As I swallowed, I caught a glimpse of Dylan's face turning ashen. I set the empty glass down and turned to Alex. "It's my first night back. Let's just have a good time, all right? Cut the drama." Alex sat down sheepishly, and the others quickly found new topics of conversation. The lively atmosphere returned, but I could feel Chloe's eyes fixed on me. "Thank you," she said under her breath, her voice filled with a familiar softness. I just smiled, not saying a word. Instead, I flagged down a waiter and ordered her a chai latte. 3 years had passed, and she was still as beautiful as ever, though now there were faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes. And the man sitting next to her was glaring at me with pure venom. As the night wound down, Dylan abruptly stood up. "I'm going to the restroom." After he left, Chloe hesitated for a moment before asking me quietly, "These past 3 years, have you been okay?" I swirled the remaining ice in my glass. "Not bad," I said lightly. "Learned a lot." "Leo," she started to say something, then stopped, letting out a soft sigh. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "It's all in the past." Chloe wiped the corner of her eye and managed a small smile. I noticed her fingers unconsciously pressing against her stomach. Her brow furrowed in a slight grimace. "Stomach acting up again?" I asked softly, my voice low enough for only her to hear. Chloe was visibly startled. A flash of surprise crossed her face, quickly replaced by a wave of complex emotions. She couldn't believe that after 3 years, I would still notice a detail so small. "It's an old problem," she said, forcing a smile. "I've been so busy with work. I keep forgetting to eat." I pulled a small, silver pillbox from the inner pocket of my jacket and slid it across the table to her. "Same as always. 2 of these should do the trick." Chloe stared at the familiar pillbox, her fingers trembling slightly. It was the one I'd gotten for her in college, always stocked with her specific antacids. She couldn't believe I still carried it. You still remember," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I gave her a gentle smile. "Some habits are hard to break." I paused, then added, "Don't push yourself so hard. Eat well, stay warm. Your health is the most important thing." Her eyes reddened, and she quickly looked down, her long hair falling to hide her face. "Leo," she hesitated. "Are you really not bothered by it anymore?" I let out a soft laugh and poured her the chai latte. "It's been 3 years. What is there to hold on to?" My fingertips tapped the side of the mug. "When it comes to love, there's no right or wrong. It's just about timing and fate." That sentence seemed to strike a deep chord within her. After that night, Chloe started showing up in my social circle more and more. At every get-together, she was the first to RSVP. I would casually arrange the seating to place her near me, but not right next to me, close enough for her to feel my presence without it seeming intentional. Slowly, she began texting me more often. At first, it was about work, but soon it drifted into the small details of her life. Whenever the conversation veered toward our shared past, I would maintain a perfect balance of warmth and distance. I often reminded her to take care of herself, to look after her health. She'd reply that I was nagging, but her tone was filled with an underlying warmth. "Passed by that old milkshake place from high school today. Can't believe it's still open," she texted. I stared at the message, a small smile playing on my lips. It was where we'd had our first date. I deliberately waited half an hour before replying. "I remember you always got the double fudge chocolate with extra whipped cream." The moment I hit send, the typing bubble appeared at the top of the chat. Chloe's reply came quickly. "You still remember?" I could almost see her ears turning pink. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I waited until just before I went to sleep and sent a final message. "Get some rest. Don't stay up too late." That push and pull, that carefully calibrated distance, was the most effective hook of all. The next morning, my phone vibrated me awake. It was a picture from Chloe, a steaming cup of coffee next to half a bagel. The caption read, "Listen to you. Remembered to eat breakfast today." I chuckled and typed back, "Good, keep it up, but coffee's rough on your stomach. Try a smoothie next time." This became our new normal. She started to report her daily schedule to me, an unspoken agreement between us. One weekend afternoon, I was at the gym, dripping with sweat. My phone buzzed. A message from Chloe. "What are you up to?" I wiped my forehead and sent her a picture of the treadmill's display. "Just finished a 3-mile run." "Wow, impressive." She replied instantly. "I've gained a few pounds lately." I decided to tease her. "Want to join me? I remember you were a champion on the swim team in college." The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a message came through. "Are you offering to train me?" I could picture her biting her lip as she typed. "You're always welcome," I replied nonchalantly. "But it's getting late today, and I've got dinner plans. How about tomorrow morning?" "Okay," she replied in a flash, then quickly added, "I mean, if it's convenient for you." That cautious, hopeful probing was music to my ears. The next morning, I was waiting at the gym entrance when a slightly late Chloe rushed up. She was dressed in sleek athletic wear, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail that exposed the graceful line of her neck. When she saw me, her eyes flickered, and she nervously twisted her fingers together. "You're 3 minutes late," I said, looking at my watch. My tone was gentle but firm. "Be on time next time." Chloe bit her lower lip. "Sorry, It's fine." I cut her off. "Let's start with the basics today." For the next hour, I guided her through the different machines, my hands demonstrating the proper form. Every time my palm brushed against the small of her back or her wrist, I could feel a slight tremor run through her. "Keep your breathing steady," I instructed, standing behind her as she did crunches, my hands hovering near her waist. "Engage your core. Don't use your neck." Chloe's cheeks were flushed, whether from exertion or embarrassment. I couldn't tell. After the workout, I handed her a bottle of water. "Good work." She took small sips, a drop of water escaping and trickling down her chin. I reached out naturally and wiped it away with my thumb. The sudden, intimate gesture made Chloe freeze. I feigned a moment of awkwardness, quickly pulling my hand back. "Sorry," I said, force of habit. Those 3 words landed like a small, sharp hammer on her heart. On the way out, Chloe was unusually quiet. It wasn't until we were about to part ways that she finally worked up the courage to ask, "Tomorrow, can we do this again?" I looked at her hopeful, anxious eyes and smiled. "Of course, as long as you want to." The gym became our regular meeting spot. Chloe's newfound enthusiasm for fitness was surprising. She showed up on time every day. I knew she wasn't there for the workout, just as I wasn't there to be her trainer. One day, while we were in the middle of a set, Dylan's voice cut through the air. "Chloe, what are you doing with him again? I thought we had plans for dinner tonight." Chloe froze, her expression turning cold. "What are you doing here?" Dylan's voice rose. "I called you, and you didn't answer. I was worried something happened." His eyes darted between me and Chloe, his face growing darker by the second. I slowly wiped the sweat from my brow and said to Chloe, "Let's call it a day." Chloe bit her lip, a flicker of indecision in her eyes. She glanced at Dylan, then back at me and finally said softly, "Leo, let's reschedule." I nodded with a smile and headed for the locker room. Behind me, I could hear Dylan's voice, lowered but still sharp with accusation. "Why are you always with him lately?" In the locker room, I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my hands. The man in the mirror had a faint, knowing smile on his face. I knew Dylan's patience was at its limit. My phone vibrated. A text from Chloe. "I'm so sorry, Leo. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this." I didn't reply immediately. I took my time, drying off and changing into a fresh shirt. It wasn't until I was walking out of the gym that I finally texted back. "It's okay. I get it. He's probably just worried about losing you." Chloe's reply was instant. "He's been so paranoid lately. Don't overthink it," I typed, choosing my words carefully. "Given our history, it's understandable that he'd be insecure. Maybe it's best if we keep our distance for a while." The next morning, my doorbell rang insistently. I looked through the peephole and saw Chloe standing outside, dark circles under her eyes. She clearly hadn't slept. I deliberately waited a few moments before opening the door, affecting the perfect look of surprise. So early. Chloe stood on the welcome mat, her fingers clutching the strap of her purse. I got into a fight with Dylan. I stepped aside to let her in, then went to the kitchen to pour her a glass of water, giving her a moment to compose herself. Through the glass partition, I saw her sink onto the sofa, her shoulders trembling slightly. Here, drink this. I handed her the water and sat down nearby, maintaining a polite distance. Clutching the glass, Chloe began to vent. Her words were a torrent of frustration with Dylan. I knew all of it, of course. After we called off the engagement, her parents had come to my family. Once they understood the real reason they had torn into Chloe, she had begged them to accept Dylan. But how could they? It wasn't just his academic failures that disappointed them. He was a poor kid from Appalachia. How could he possibly be worthy of a Newport heiress? Dylan had knelt outside the Vance mansion for a week straight. Chloe had threatened to kill herself. Finally, her parents relented. The two of them became the stars of their own tragic love story. The Newport socialite and the penniless boy from the mountains. The story of the gold digger who successfully married up sent shockwaves through our social circles. Dylan got a job at Vance Industries, but the fantasy was far from reality. He started on the factory floor, working grueling hours with only 2 days off a month. He lasted 6 months before quitting to become a stay-at-home husband. Chloe's parents were furious, but they let their daughter have her way. In private, though, they made his life a living hell. Dylan, ever the sycophant, would endure their abuse and then run to Chloe, crying about how mistreated he was, making her feel trapped and exhausted. He wanted to use the Vances to climb the social ladder, but he was hopelessly out of his depth. At every party and gala, the boy from the mountains became a running joke. No one respected him, and by extension, people started whispering about the Vances. Slowly, he became paranoid and possessive. Any successful man near Chloe would send him into a jealous rage. She could patiently explain it away once or twice, but after a while, she grew tired of it, too. The final straw was when he crashed a dinner with an important client and caused a scene, single-handedly torpedoing a $50 million deal. I listened quietly, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug. You know, she said, suddenly looking up at me, tears glistening in her eyes. That bastard even cheated on me. He used my money to hire an escort. I put down my mug and sighed softly. Chloe, it's not my place to judge someone else's relationship. He knelt in front of me, banging his head on the floor, begging for forgiveness. I chose this love, so I forgave him. Chloe's voice choked up, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt. I thought he would change, but last night, he did it again. I passed her a tissue, not pressing for details. There was no need. I had arranged for the information to be leaked. By now, everyone in our circle knew. The fiancé of the Vance heiress was using her family's money on prostitutes. Chloe's parents were livid. They'd spent the morning screaming at her. Right now, Dylan was probably back on his knees at their mansion. But that wasn't all. I had found something even more explosive. I would wait until the Vances forgave him one more time, and then I would release it to the world. I didn't do much. I just offered a few simple words of comfort. After Chloe left, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, watching her car disappear down the street. Just as I'd predicted, Dylan signed a written apology and earned Chloe's forgiveness once again. His excuse? He was just so consumed by jealousy over her spending time with me that he'd made a mistake any man could make. All I could think was, wow, true love, I guess. To avoid disrupting their beautiful reconciliation, I deliberately distanced myself from Chloe. I stopped liking her posts on Instagram, ignored her in group chats. When we ran into each other at mutual friends' parties, I would offer a polite nod and immediately turn to talk to someone else. This intentional distance was more effective than any amount of closeness. My phone started buzzing with messages from her, first tentative, then increasingly anxious. Are you busy lately? It was the third time she'd sent that exact question. I stared at the notification on my screen, waiting until late at night to reply. Sorry, just got out of a meeting. Took on a new project, so things have been a bit crazy. The moment the message sent, the typing bubble appeared, but it was a full 5 minutes before her reply came through. Can we meet? I'm at the old spot. I could picture her, staring at her phone, typing and deleting, over and over. I made sure to arrive 20 minutes late, pushing open the door of the clam chowder shack. I saw Chloe sitting at a window table, a bowl of cooled, untouched soup in front of her. I slid into the plastic chair across from her, making it creak. Chloe's head snapped up. A flash of excitement lit her eyes. only to be extinguished a moment later. "It's cold," I said, gesturing to the bowl. "Why didn't you eat?" She shook her head, her fingers toying with the spoon. "I wanted to wait for you." I waved the waitress over and ordered 2 fresh bowls. As the steaming soup was placed on our table, Chloe's eyes began to redden. "Leo," she hesitated. "There's a new rumor going around. That Dylan has a secret son. This was why I had agreed to meet her tonight." The story that he'd gotten a girl pregnant in college was now spreading like wildfire across local gossip blogs. Everyone was saying she had terrible taste in men, making her the laughingstock of the city. Vance Industries stock was taking a hit as investors began to doubt her judgment, pausing major collaborations. Chloe was crying, her shoulders shaking. I gently pushed the box of tissues toward her, watching her trembling fingers pull one out to dab at the corners of her eyes. "I checked," she said, her voice hoarse. "It's true. The boy. He's 3 years old." Steam rose between us, blurring her face. I stirred my chowder in silence, waiting for her to continue. "He knelt before my parents, swearing it was a mistake from his youth, that he was just a stupid kid." Chloe let out a laugh, a sound more painful than a sob. "He said I'm the only one he loves." I set my spoon down, the metal clinking against the ceramic bowl. "And do you believe him?" Chloe looked up, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know." I looked at her ravaged face and asked softly, "Do you love him?" The question was a knife, slicing through her last defense. Her lips trembled, and the tears finally broke free, streaming down her cheeks. "I thought I did," she choked out. But when he was on his knees in front of me, all I felt was disgust. I reached across the table and covered her cold hand with mine. "Chloe, you deserve better." My words opened a floodgate. She broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. The other patrons stared. I stood up, moved to the seat beside her, and gently pulled her into an embrace. "I'm so tired," she whispered, her head resting on my shoulder, her tears soaking through my shirt. "Leo, I'm just so tired." I stroked her back, soothing her like she was a small, wounded animal. "It's going to be okay." That night, I took her for a few drinks. We ended up in a hotel room, the night a blur of passion and release. When the morning sun streamed through a gap in the curtains, Chloe was still fast asleep. I rose quietly, standing by the bed and looking down at her exhausted but peaceful face. Tear tracks still stained her lashes, but the corners of her mouth were turned up in a slight smile, as if she were having a pleasant dream. I picked up my phone, snapped a photo of her sleeping in the messy bed, and sent it to Dylan. After sending the text, I immediately shut my phone off. I knew he would lose his mind. A parasite like him feared nothing more than losing his host. I got dressed and left a note on the nightstand. "I'm sorry, this was a mistake." Walking out of the hotel, I took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. And now, the real show was about to begin. I turned my phone on around noon. A tidal wave of missed calls and messages flooded the screen. Most were from Chloe, a few from Alex and the guys. But the centerpiece was the 37 missed calls and string of profanity-laced texts from Dylan. I deleted everything from Dylan without a second thought and called Chloe back. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. "Leo, where are you?" I was standing on the cliff walk, staring out at the gray, churning water of the Atlantic. "I'm thinking about the mistake we made last night." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a choked sob. "You regret it?" I let the silence stretch, listening to her breathing grow ragged. "No," I said finally. "I'm just worried it's not fair to you. You need time to think clearly, not to just jump from one man to another. But I need you." Her voice suddenly became firm. "It was over between me and Dylan yesterday." I narrowed my eyes, watching a distant ferry cut through the waves. "Chloe, don't rush into anything. We both need time to cool off." I heard a sharp intake of breath on her end, then a resolute declaration. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Last night, that was what I truly wanted." A smirk I couldn't suppress touched my lips. "And Dylan? He was never the solution." Her voice turned to ice. "My lawyers are already handling it." "Chloe, are you sure? This doesn't seem like you." I heard the rustle of papers on her end, as if she were reviewing a document. "He lied to me for years. Those so-called medical records for his depression, all of them were fake." Her voice was tight with suppressed rage. "Even his story about being kidnapped in Thailand. There's more to it." I feigned surprise. "What do you mean?" "I hired a private investigator," Chloe said, taking a deep breath. He was never kidnapped. He spent those 2 weeks with a local woman, and the ransom my family paid? He gambled it all away. I remained silent, giving her the space to process her own words. My phone rang again. It was Alex. Leo, you are not gonna believe this. His voice was buzzing with excitement. That scumbag Dylan just got hauled away by the cops in front of Vance Tower. I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. You're telling me? I heard Chloe handed them proof that he embezzled over 300 grand from the company. Alex was gloating. That piece of trash is going to be locked up for years. I murmured a soft not surprised by the outcome. A leech like Dylan was nothing without his host. After hanging up with Alex, I drove to the Vance Industries headquarters. A small crowd of reporters was still gathered out front, drawn by the earlier commotion. I bypassed the main entrance, taking the private elevator from the underground garage straight to the top floor. When the doors opened, Chloe's assistant, Lynn, was pacing anxiously in the hallway. Mr. White. She looked relieved to see me. Hurrying over. Ms. Vance is waiting for you in her office. I nodded and followed her down the quiet corridor. The door to Chloe's office was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see her standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, her back to me, a silhouette both fragile and defiant. Lynn knocked softly. Ms. Vance, Mr. White is here. Chloe turned. Her eyes were red and swollen, but they shone with an unusual brightness. She waved Lynn away and walked quickly toward me, stopping just a foot away. You came, she said, her voice raspy. I noticed she was clutching a file, her knuckles white from the pressure. Are you okay? I asked quietly, my gaze sweeping over the scattered photos and documents on her desk. They were the P.I.S. work, pictures of Dylan with other women, evidence of his gambling debts. Chloe gave a bitter laugh and handed me the file. Look at this. It was a bank statement, detailing how Dylan had siphoned nearly $500,000 from her personal accounts over the last 3 years. I was so blind, she said, her voice dripping with self-loathing. To be fooled by someone like him for so long. I put the file down and gently took her trembling hand. It's not too late to see the truth. Chloe suddenly looked up, her eyes sharp. Leo, did you know? Did you know all along? The question was sudden, but I was prepared. I met her gaze without flinching. I had him investigated after I went to Italy, but you wouldn't have believed me back then. Chloe's pupils constricted. Her fingers tightened on the fabric of her dress. Silence filled the office, broken only by the low hum of the air conditioner. So, her voice trembled. Your coming back was. I came back because my father's health is declining, and I need to take over the family business. I interrupted, my voice calm and even. As for us, what happened between us is in the past. The words were a dull knife, slowly twisting in her heart. I watched the light in her eyes flicker and die. Is that so? She managed a brittle smile. Then last night, we were both drunk, I said, taking a step back, creating distance. I'm sorry it happened, but we're better off as friends, aren't we? The color drained from her face. She spun around, her hands braced on the desk for support, her shoulders shaking violently. You used me, she said, her voice as cold as ice. I walked slowly toward her until I was standing right behind her. I let my fingers brush against her trembling shoulder and leaned in to whisper in her ear. Used you? No. I just gave you an opportunity to see the truth. She whirled around, her hand raised to slap me. I caught her wrist easily, pinning her against the glass of the window. Outside, the entire city sprawled beneath us, but her world had shrunk to the rage and shock in her eyes. Let go of me, she struggled, her voice thick with tears. Shoo! I used my other hand to stroke her cheek. We wouldn't want the staff to hear. The ever-elegant Ms. Vance, losing her composure. Her breathing was ragged, her chest heaving. What do you want? I released her and stepped back, smoothing my cuffs. I want you to know what betrayal feels like. 4 years ago, you chose that worthless parasite over me. You should have known this day would come. Her eyes widened in horror. So you came back just to get revenge on me? Clever girl, I said with a smile, pulling a folder from my briefcase. And by the way, White Enterprises has acquired a 15% stake in your company. Combined with the shares your father had to leverage against his loans, I am now the second largest shareholder. She staggered backward, knocking over a cup of coffee. Impossible. My father would never. Because of that worthless parasite, I said coolly. Your family's business has been failing for years. Investors have been pulling out left and right. And since the Whites and the Fiancées have always worked so closely together, well, now we're just working a little more closely. Chloe crumpled to the floor. 2 months later, Chloe found out she was pregnant. The doctor told her the pregnancy was high risk. If she chose to terminate it, she might never be able to have children. She came to my office. I sat behind my mahogany desk, tapping my fingers on the polished surface, watching her stand before me. Her hand rested gently on her stomach, and her eyes held a softness I hadn't seen in a long time. Leo, we need to talk, she said, her voice quieter than usual. I closed the file in front of me and gestured for her to sit. What did the doctor say about the baby? She bit her lip, hesitating. The doctor said, if I don't have this one, I might never be able. So, I began slowly. You're here to make me take responsibility? Her fingers clenched her purse strap, knuckles turning white. Leo, I know you hate me, but this child is innocent. I let out a soft laugh and stood, walking around the desk to stand over her. I looked down at her, my voice laced with ice. And how do you prove this child is mine? Her face flushed with shame and anger. Since you came back, the only person I've been with is you. This child can only be yours. I leaned in close, my fingers gently tilting her chin up. Fine, I heard myself say. We'll get married. Chloe's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief. What did you say? I turned away, a perfectly crafted, gentle smile on my face. I said, we'll get married. We'll give the child a proper home. She threw herself into my arms, her tears soaking the front of my shirt. I stroked her long hair, my gaze drifting over her shoulder to the 3 old coins sitting on my desk. I had cast them that morning. The reading was clear. The tide has turned. The wedding was planned in record time. Both our families were ecstatic about the sudden turn of events, especially when they saw Chloe's slightly swelling belly. They couldn't stop smiling. The wedding was the event of the year in Newport. Even grander than the engagement party we never finished 3 years ago. Married life was peaceful, idyllic even. Chloe resigned from her position at the company to focus on her pregnancy. I came home on time every evening for dinner, and on weekends, I'd take her for walks along the cliff walk. The smiles on her face became more frequent. Sometimes, she'd act like she did in college, playfully begging me to buy her clam chowder from that little shack or a milkshake from the old diner. Slow down, I'd say, wiping a smudge of grease from the corner of her mouth, watching her eat with a fond smile. She would blush. The baby says he's hungry. In those moments, a strange, unfamiliar softness would stir within me. Maybe this was what having a family felt like. The day our son was born, the entire White family was in an uproar. A healthy 7.5-pound boy, with a powerful cry and features that were a mirror image of my own as a baby. Chloe lay exhausted in the hospital bed, her eyes shining with pure happiness. We became the talk of our circle, a modern fairy tale. They all said our love had come full circle, that after all the detours and pain, we had finally found our way back to each other. For over a year, we were the perfect, most devoted couple in Newport. But is life ever really that perfect? Of course it is, because I had cast the coins. I had seen the reading. This was the best possible ending. Chloe would no longer be a threat, and I would get everything. Through a series of strategic moves, White Enterprises fully absorbed Vance Industries, making it a subsidiary under my absolute control. My father-in-law and mother-in-law were gently pushed out into a comfortable semi-retirement. After all, why resist? Everything would one day belong to their grandson. Chloe, too, was slowly and deliberately edged out of all core business decisions. We soon had twin daughters. Trapped by the gilded chains of motherhood, she finally became what I had always intended for her to be, the perfect canary in my cage.